Hey guys, here's another online lesson. Chapter 8 is all about graphing. We did some of it in Chapter 2, if you remember. We graphed equations and wrote equations from graphs. We're going to do more of that in this chapter. And this first lesson is just identifying a linear equation, meaning identifying an equation that ends up being a line on a graph. So let's get started. Here we go. Some vocab is linear equation and rate of change. First thing, a linear equation is just an equation whose solutions fall on a line on the coordinate plane. So they make a line on the coordinate plane, and all solutions of a particular linear equation fall on the line. And all the points on the line are solutions, which means that there's usually an infinite number of solutions because a line has an infinite number of points. All right? So let's kind of jump right into it and see if we can determine linear equations. So to start with, we have this equation here, 2 over x minus 3y equals 4. And we want to determine if it's a line just by looking at it. And then we're going to explain how we know. And so there's like 4 ways an equation's written where it's not a line. So if these 5 things happen, it's not going to be a line. The first one is if there's a radical. And that means if the x or y is radicalized. So if you have that or that anywhere, it is not a line. Next one, if there are exponents, and that means if x or y is raised to an exponent, like x cubed or y to the second power, not an linear equation. 3, if x and y are multiplied together. So if for some reason they're touching, you multiply them together, it's not going to be a line. Number 4, if there is absolute value, if x or y are in the absolute values here, x or y, so you could have like x plus 3 absolute value, anywhere in the equation, it is not going to be a line. And the last one is if there's a variable in the denominator. So right here we have x in the denominator, so this is not a line or not a linear equation because there's a variable as the denominator, because x is the denominator. Okay? So that's just an easy way to look to see if the equation is going to be a line. Those 5 things: radicals, exponents, xy multiplied together, absolute value, and variable as the denominator. Okay, let's look at the next thing. How do we tell if it's a linear equation by looking at a graph? Well, it's pretty simple. It's not a line if there's a curve. So it's not a line if it's not a line. Here it's curved. It is not a line. If you have something like that, not a line. Something like that, not a line. Anything with a curve is not a line. All right? Pretty easy. Third way, how about looking at a table? Well, there's 2 ways to figure it out. One, you can just graph it and see if it's going to be a line. But the one I'm going to talk about here is the second way. Look for a constant rate of change. That means the x and the y are changing at a constant rate. So to go from -5 to -1, I'm adding 4. To go from -1 to 3, I'm adding 4. From 3 to 7, I'm adding 4. So that's a constant rate of change. Now I'm going to look at the y's. To go from 6 to 4, I'm subtracting 2. From 4 to 2, I'm subtracting 2. From 2 to 0, subtracting 2. So this is a linear equation because there is a constant rate of change in both the x and y. It has to be both. Rate of change. And if you remember, what this is finding is the slope eventually. We'll use this to find the slope. Okay? And there's one last thing that we need to look at to see if it's a linear equation, and that is when they give us points. So two ways to do it again. One, just graph it. If it's a line, it's a line. It's a linear equation. And the second way, which I'm going to show you, is to make a table and do what we did last time. So I'm going to make a table of x and y values. -4, 2, -2, 1, 0, 0, and 2, -1. Make sure when you're making this table that you line them up in ascending order, you're going up, or descending order, you're going down. Otherwise it won't work. And then I just look for a constant rate of change. From -4 to -2, I'm adding 2. -2 to 0, adding 2, adding 2. So that's good. Now I got to check my y's. 2 to 1 is -1. That's disappearing ink. 1 to 0 is -1. 0 to -1 is -1. So again, this is a linear equation because it's a constant rate of change. Okay? So those are the different ways that we can tell if it's a linear equation, by looking at a graph, by looking at an equation, by looking at a table, or by just looking at points. Hopefully this helped, and we'll talk more about it in class. See you tomorrow. Bye.